on this episode of the Girl Talk Podcast.
One of the biggest weapons we have against anxiety is thankfulness, the way you're thinking about it. Thankfulness. In the moment, thankfulness is deadly to anxiety.
Hello there. You are listening to the Girl Talk Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Fox Toyota of East Tennessee. My name is Carol.
I'm Kelly.
I'm Tricia.
And we're so glad that you have joined us today. We are going to be tackling the monster of stress today. Stress, good stress, bad stress, it all affects us. And I think probably where we're going to jump off on this topic is the difference between good stress and bad stress. Because we all have stress of all kinds.
You know, I just spent last week at the beach, and
So
was
you are
there.
not stressed.
I am not stressed at all right now. I feel very laid back. But I was one of the girls that I was there with is a psychologist, or at least trained in psychology. So we were talking. We got off on the topic of stress and being stressed out or whatever. And she said the most interesting thing. She said that in utero, babies cannot determine the difference between good stress and bad stress. That it's all just stress. And that stress is a learned behavior. Stress and its coping mechanisms is a learned behavior. It's something we're taught as young children, which was fascinating to me, especially in the context of good stress versus bad stress, that both of those things can affect us both negatively and positively. And that sometimes our bodies have a difficult time figuring out which ones are good stress and which one's bad stress. It all increases our cortisol level.
Yeah.
But it's a learned... I mean, that's the word that kind of jumped out at me when you said that.
Yeah, that it's learned that as young children, if we have been exposed to a lot of stress, whether it's good stress or bad stress, we're learning how to cope with that in both healthy and unhealthy ways.
Right. So let's back up and define good stress. What are we talking about when we say good stress? The thing that comes to my mind is the normal amount of stress that we encounter day to day by everyday responsibilities. I'm not talking like major stress, but I'm just talking about, having to show up for work on time and, responsibilities at work. That's all good things, but it does kind of provide
Motivation.
some kind
Motivation to get us out of the bed.
Right. So that's what I would define as good stress. Y'all have anything that you'd like to throw in there and add to that?
I've done a little bit of reading about this because stress and anxiety is certainly something that I have battled. I've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it again. But I've learned a little bit about it. God gave us the ability to have this good stress. Good stress is a gift from God because it is the thing that happens in our body when we need to either pay attention more closely or we need to have more energy. We need to run away. It's the fight or flight, but it's also what we use if you're doing a sporting event. You're supposed to be a little bit anxious. You're supposed to have those butterflies because it helps you pay attention. It helps you focus more. There's good stress in that it is something that God's given us to exceed what we can ordinarily do.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a gift from God.
Yeah, sure.
But what happens and what you're talking about is when our bodies take over that same feeling of stress that we're supposed to have in those moments, but put it on a different moment, a moment of emotional distress instead of a physical need. And our bodies can't tell the difference. Our mind is what's telling the difference between is this good stress or bad stress. But when our minds go into the bad stress place, it all feels bad. So good stress is good. It's a gift from God to help us focus and pay attention.
I also think good stress helps us be better. I think about like college. College can be really stressful.
Yeah.
But on the back side of it, you've learned something. You've experienced new things. You've become better. Early in my career, there was lots of really good stress, but it was the good stress that helped me learn how to accomplish things, how to perform better, how to react better, how to react differently.
Kind of stretching your boundaries.
Made me a better professional today than I was back then because I had some good healthy stress.
Okay.
Think about muscles. Muscles, in order to grow or even lengthen, have to be put through some kind of stress. exercise, some kind of a stretching. Think about yoga or something like that. And we're kind of like that. We got to be put through a little bit of stress in order to grow and stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And nobody has to define bad stress. I think everybody kind of knows what that means. So I think probably that the question that comes to my mind is, how do you know when you've kind of crossed over into bad stress? So you have this amount of good stress. How do you kind of know? Because I think one of the things that at least I do, I don't know if anybody else does this, but at least I do, is I'm not very good at managing the ways that I feel and paying attention to those things all the time. So I just figure, I'm going to know, and I don't. And so I just wake up one morning and I'm so stressed out and I'm snippy at everybody and I can't understand why. So let's kind of define the point when it goes from good stress to bad stress. What is that point?
Well, I think there are physical symptoms that take over in any stressful situation, like sweaty palms or inability to focus and think. Having difficulty breathing. When you're experiencing those things and you're not in a place where you're having to use your good stress coping, like you wake up in the morning in your bed and you're starting to feel anxious about the day, that's bad stress.
Yeah.
So if you're starting to go down that path, you're heading down the wrong path. I say that because I know I'm going down the wrong path when I do that. One of the biggest triggers for me is when I feel paralyzed. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. I can't do this. I can't do that. I keep thinking, overthinking, negative thinking. When I go into that mode, I know that I'm going into the bad stress mode.
Okay.
Yeah. It's that fight or flight, but then it becomes fight, flight, or freeze.
Ooh,
and that when that freeze happens, it's not healthy.
It's not helpful.
It's not a healthy thing. Right. Yeah. That freezing is rarely a good thing for us.
When I see it is that I get irritable with people. And I love people. I love being around people. But when I start to feel that like irritation and like this is getting on my nerves, and that's how sometimes I can tell something's wrong here. And I need
especially those people you enjoy spending time with.
Yeah.
When they start getting annoying to you.
It's like, what is causing this? And I think probably for me, the older you get, I know that you learn some things about yourself and you're more in tune with who you are. But I think the older that I've gotten, the more I've realized that in the past, I don't really formulate a plan for dealing with these things. I'm always proactive. I'm not proactive. I'm reactive, and then I'm so stressed out. And then I'm like, oh, I have to go back and apologize to all these places. And what I'm learning is that we can be proactive in putting a plan together to say, when I see these 3 things, or when I see these 5 things, or whenever I see this one thing, I know that that's kind of a trigger to alert me, hey, this is some bad stress. And then if I can put a plan in place to deal with that, then I can relieve that stress in a healthy way.
Yes. And
it not damage my relationships or, my health in a negative way, those kinds of things. But I'll just be totally upfront on it. I'm not that smart. And when it's taken me a long time to get there, to realize, hey, you can actually have a plan in place so that when those things start to happen, you're not reacting, you're actually proactive, and you can make that happen on the front end.
You're talking about the difference between being on the defense versus on the offense.
Yeah.
And if you can go, now I think part of that, and I love what you said, and I echo all of it. Really, the question is, what am I thinking? Because what I'm thinking is going to dictate where I go. But you do need to be aware of triggers. Are there environments that create that bad stress and that feeling? Are there relationships that create that? Situations, places where I know when I go there, I start to go down that path. Topics, all of that. And so you'll know. So that's when you can be more proactive than reactive, because you're going into that same situation. And every time you go into that situation and you have a conversation with that person, or you're in that environment, you're going to feel stressed. Then you can go on the offensive with your weapons. But that makes a ton of sense to me. I have to ask myself, not how am I feeling, but how am I thinking?
Right.
Yeah, our thoughts can control so much of our stress. I was thinking too about like some healthy stress when we take on new projects that we like planning an event, for instance, or having a group of people over. That can cause lots of healthy stress, or it can cause bad stress depending on what you dwell on and how you think about it.
Yeah.
If you are thinking about the joy that's going to come from it, or you're being able to accomplish a checklist of things, then that's great. But if you start worrying about it and worrying what the outcomes are going to be, and you have that kind of self-talk that ends up then turning that good stress into bad stress, then that's where you've kind of crossed that line.
Yeah.
Going further with that analogy, so Kelly is a wonderful hostess. You know how to do it, and you do it right. The second you said that, I thought, I put myself in that position like, oh, I'm having people over. I went down immediately bad path. I started to say, they're going to see my house. They're going to think I'm a messy person. I am a failure. I can't keep a house going. Just the second you said that, I went down that path immediately versus a much better path like, oh, I'm going to be able to love on people, have them into my house and treat them well. It's amazing how something like that can take you down one of two paths.
Yeah. And I think if you don't have a plan in place, then you wind up thinking, I'm never going to have people over until the end of time. And that's not a healthy place either, you know?
I think a lot of that too gets back to how we've been gifted. I've been gifted with the spiritual gift of hospitality. So for me, that's really good. It's feeding my God-given purpose, and God-given skills and abilities and talents. But for you, you've been
my
gifted.
gift is disorganization.
No, it's not.
Somewhere around there.
So you might have different spiritual gifts
Yes.
that God would feed for you to bring you joy because you're serving in your giftedness.
All right. I have to stop us right here because we're talking about stress. And one of the things that always used to stress me out is that I would take spiritual gifts inventory and hospitality would come up and I'd be like, I can't cook. Like, what does that mean?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
You find a caterer.
Exactly. It just because you have a certain gift, it may manifest itself in different ways. For instance, you would be hard pressed to find a room that I go into that I don't make everybody feel welcome. That's
Sure.
That's
Absolutely.
hospitality
it is.
in my way. It's not necessarily me making the greatest casserole you've ever had and coming to my house. It might be, hey, you need to pick up food on your way, but I'm
going to love you up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be good. Yeah.
Because I think we get so hung up in these definitions and then we end up stressing ourselves out because we have a certain gift and we don't, operate in that gift like we think we should. If you have the gift of hospitality and you can't make everything in Better Homes and Gardens, do you really have that gift? It just, we do these things in our mind and we don't have a plan for dealing with that stress, and it leads us totally down the wrong path. And for a lot of years of my life, I kept trying to be somebody I wasn't, and I ended up frustrated, not only spiritually, but, in my gifting as well, because it didn't look like everybody else.
Say that again. You spent so much time trying to be somebody you weren't.
Yes.
And that is huge.
Yes. Because I thought, you hear all these things, and this is probably rabbit trail, so I'm sorry. Go ahead and just disclaimer up front. But, you hear about when you're growing up in the church, you hear about how women, kind of need to keep their place and they need to be quiet and reserved. And so a number of years in my life, I was very frustrated because I felt like that because I was loud and obnoxious at times, that there was something wrong with me. Instead of seeing the other side of that God had gifted me with a personality that, and I'm able to communicate with others easily. Now, I learned that later on, but a lot of my life I spent thinking there was something wrong with me and feeling that rejection from the spiritual community because I did not fit into the box of what a godly Proverbs 31 woman looked like. I didn't fit. And so there was no Proverbs 32, that said, and everything else that you might, but do I believe that God gifted me and uniquely created me? Absolutely.
Yes.
But there was that tension in there that created stress for me because I wasn't like everybody else. And I like to go fishing with my dad and mow the grass, but at the same time, I like to get dressed up and fix my hair. I mean, where do we get so focused in on putting each other in these little boxes, and if you don't fit into one of the boxes perfectly, then there's something wrong with you. And I think that just frustrated the fool out of me for a lot of years.
And I think that's what gets back to that good stress versus bad stress,
Right.
is that the good stress, there's God-given stress that when we are in our giftedness, when we're acting the way God made us to be within, a nice box, when we are thriving in who God made us to be, that's can be some really good stress. There's going to be some good things that come from that. But when we try to, growth, that's right. When we try to be somebody that God did not make us to be, and worry about things that are not ours to worry about, that's when we end up with a lot of stress, bad stress.
I think what you're saying, and I think it's so true, is that one of the things that really causes us bad stress is comparison. Comparing me to you, comparing you to her, all of that is not helpful, and it creates bad stress instead of just being who God has created us to be and dealing with the good stress that comes with growing in that way versus trying so hard to be like the person over there that you're comparing yourself to. I'm learning about that all the time.
Yeah.
I also think we have, as type A women especially, try to take on too many things and accomplish too much stuff. And we try to be all things to all people sometimes, and that can cause lots of unhealthy stress.
Not possible. It's just not possible.
It's not possible. It's not.
Yeah.
And you're not growing in the way God wants you to grow if you are saying yes to all the things that you're asked to do.
Yeah.
And, you can't grow in the good, healthy ways.
Yeah.
Because you're stressed out.
So I just shared with y'all how I've seen stress, kind of push me to the point of being unhealthy. Are there ways that you can, go back in your life and point to situations where you felt like stress got to an unhealthy level, maybe even a breaking point, and you had to make some changes?
Yeah, there's been lots of times in my life. The stress for me manifests itself in insomnia, the bad stress.
Yeah.
So if I can't put it down, I normally can go to sleep very easily. If I can't go to sleep quickly because my mind is racing 100 miles an hour, that is a very big sign for me that there is some very unhealthy bad stress going on in my life.
Yeah.
And that happened a lot when I've worked at different places. Won't out any particular job. But there's been times where I couldn't sleep because I would take on too much of the I need to be somebody that God didn't create me to be. Yeah. And I can do all things because I am a superwoman, and it's just not true. Yeah. What about you, T?
Oh, yes, I have battled the stress to the point of not being able to function. There were times in my life, I remember when I was younger especially, I would spend time watching Little House on the Prairie back-to-back episodes because I couldn't deal with my life. So I would delve into this escapism route because I couldn't tolerate my own feelings. So I had to distract myself. And then I learned to distract myself in other ways. And I tried food, or I tried exercise, or I tried all these things all as a distraction tool. And honestly, it's not that I'm past that. I'm still struggling right now. I actually asked for prayer earlier today because I'm battling some anxiety. It's based on a specific part of my life, but it's starting to invade the other parts of my life. Yeah. And so my mind is constantly whirring and worrying and filling up with negative thoughts. And thank God I realized that, and I've started to try to put some action plans in place for myself. Yeah. Started reading a new book, which I absolutely adore. It's called Attacking Anxiety, and it is from a pastor who had panic attacks, and he describes it in such a real and raw way, and then he describes the shame of being in ministry and still struggling to such a profound degree, and then the desire to hide that. And it was just like, I'm going, oh, I know what you mean. I feel that. That's me too, me too. And so I've been reading it, and he talks about how he finally got to this place where we can all get to, where we say, no more. I am not going to just allow the anxiety to rule me. I'm not going to just say, well, I'm just an anxious person. This is just who I am. This is my particular thorn in the flesh. He says, you've got to get to a place where you say, I am going to stand up against it. Right. Stop tolerating it. Yeah. If we've been set free by Jesus, then we can live free. And you can be set free and not live free. and just standing up with Bible verses, standing up with worship and thankfulness in the midst of it, going on the offensive before you need the defensive.
Yeah.
So that's what that book's been teaching me. So this is a battle that I have been facing for a long time, but I feel like I'm getting some headway in it.
Yeah, you are. You are, and it shows.
Oh, thank you.
It shows. So be encouraged by that.
Thank you.
You know, I think that it all goes back to putting a plan in place. I think that's just what you clearly laid out. I think for too long, we as women, and I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I'm doing so intentionally. I think we as women have just said, well, you know, we're just a victim of our feelings.
Yeah.
We're just a victim of being, you know, stressful and trying to do it all. And I think you're right. It is time that we say, okay, this is done. Because I think if we can get freedom in this area and really fight back with the tools that God has provided for us to fight back with, then we can accomplish more for Him, which is the reason that we are here.
Yes.
You know, so if anything today, I hope you'll be encouraged. Number one, to think about the things that cause you to go to a place that's unhealthy. Because for me, and I will say, you know, Tricia's really challenged me on this several times. Both of you guys can tell when I don't make eye contact or when something's going on in I can start to shut down. I can continue to play the role, but there's just something that's not right. And so when you see that, saying, you know, what is your thought process in this? And identifying that has been really helpful for me in the next step, which is putting a plan in place.
Yes.
The things that you need to hear, the things that you need to say out loud, the permission that you need to give yourself to feel those emotions, yes, but then to put them in their proper place. Because when you just let your emotions run wild, you're going to end up in that unhealthy, dangerous rabbit hole every single time. Because that's what our mind just does naturally. We just want to go to the negative. We want to go to that's what comes naturally because we're sinful people and our mind goes there. But if you can A, identify the thought that you're having and then B, put a plan in place, then you won't find yourself struggling with those same things over and over and over again. You'll start to see, hey, you know what? I only had one anxious thought today.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I battled back.
Yes.
And then it'll be a couple of days and you'll think, I haven't struggled with anxiety for the last couple of, you know, and those kinds of victories we build upon and are able to do the things that God has called us to do because we are, what you just said, on the offensive instead of reacting to everything that the enemy throws our way. So, I mean, those are my two takeaways from today is just know what your triggers are, be aware of what you're thinking, and then put a plan in place. Anything else that you guys...
Yeah, and I think one of the things, too, we have to ask ourselves is this stress that I'm under right now good for me? Is it helping me grow? Is it making me better? Or is it bad for me? Is it causing me physical ailments? Is it causing me to have insomnia or anxiety? And how can I turn it around and make what might be a negative stress into a positive stress? Are there things I can do? Are there ways I can look at my situation differently? But it starts with asking ourselves, is this stress good for me or bad for me?
That's a great question because I think one of the things that we can do as believers is think that everything that is hard we need to run away from. And that is not true either. You know, there are some good things that are meant to stretch and grow us that we won't experience unless we allow that good stress to stretch us in that way. So I'm glad you brought that up, Kelly. Something else you wanted to throw in your teeth?
It's kind of the same thing that you're talking about, which is one of the biggest weapons we have against anxiety is thankfulness, the way you're thinking about it. Thankfulness. In the moment, thankfulness is deadly to anxiety. So wherever you are, whenever you're starting to feel it, you ask yourself, is this good or is this bad? If it's good, it's easy to be thankful. If it's tough, it's harder to be thankful, but I bet you can do it. And when you do it, when you find something to be thankful for, praise God for, thank God for His love, the cross, His blood, His power, His might, all of those things. When you do that in that moment, that anxiety can't stand against it.
That's good stuff. I felt myself sitting up straighter when you were sharing those truths. So battle back. You are not the victim of your thoughts or your circumstances or your stress, you do have weapons to fight back with. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You're always welcome to email us, girltalk@thelightfm.org. We'd love to hear from you. Hey, don't forget, coming up in September, we're going to be doing a live event, our first live event back after several
Oh, praise the Lord.
virtual
Been a
events.
while,
We can't wait to see you face to face. Hope you'll make plans to join us. We'll have some information on that for you coming out in the next couple of weeks. But September is going to be the time that we're going to do that live event just outside of Asheville in Weaverville, North Carolina. I want to say thank you to our friends at Fox Toyota of East Tennessee for making the podcast possible. Could not do that without your help. Am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we love you.
Reach out to us.
Yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your battle verses, your things that you do, your plan that you've put in place. We love doing life with you. That's what this podcast is all about. And we'll see you next time we gather around these microphones for the next Girl Talk podcast.